Hello, today is April 23rd, 2021. My name is Cristián Doña-Reveco, and I am interviewing Marcos Mora for the Conversaciones Oral History Project, Voces of a Pandemic project at the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Criss Library at UNO. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Marcos, that this interview will be placed in the University of Nebraska at Omaha's Dr. Cici and Mabel L. Criss Library and share with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something that you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consent. So I'll ask a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are several questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. The Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Criss Library wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and any other documentation at UNO's Dr. Cici and Mabel L. Criss Library. UNO's Criss Library will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And here are the questions. Do you give the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at UNO's Criss Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UNO's Criss Library right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow UNO's Criss Library to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
If there's any questions you don't understand or not clear enough, just let me know and I'll explain. We have many questions in the pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library and to the Criss Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members. So that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and Criss Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
Repeat that again?
Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file and make it available to researchers at the Benson?
Yes, I agree.
And the last one, on occasion, the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Thanks, Marcos. So let's start by talking a little bit about you, where you're from, where you grew up, what did you study, and all of that about you.
So I was actually born, well, I guess if we start from the beginning, my grandfather and his brothers came from Aguascalientes, Mexico, 1925, 1926. The first brother crossed 1925, then the other brothers crossed in 1926. Ended up here in Omaha, Nebraska in the 20s. So our family has a long history of, being in Omaha. My aunts and uncles, we've all been involved in the community. We got pictures, on 24th Street going way back to the, the 30s, 40s, 50s, generations and decades of time. So ironically, I've been raised here in Omaha, Nebraska and South Omaha, but I was born in Los Angeles, but my mom just took off for a little bit and I was born down there, but I've been raised here in Omaha, Nebraska. So we have one of the top 5 largest Mexican-American families here in Omaha, Nebraska. So we have a huge family because my grandfather and all them, and they had lots of kids. Everybody had a lot of kids. So we have a huge family. So our upbringing was always, we were always around kind of like a bicultural, really upbringing. You know, when you went to school, you heard American music, and that's where I loved kind of rock and oldies and this and that. And at the same time, you know, on the cultural side, you know, we were always, from time we were little kids, we danced Baile Folclórico and at the Chicano Winter Center, which is now Latino Center of the Midlands. We danced as little kids with the traditional outfits, and we were exposed to, you know, music, you know, mariachi and different type of Latin music. You know, on the weekends when someone got married or whatever, we'd go to dances and everybody's dancing, you know, rancheras and corridos and cumbias and stuff. So, but then again, when you're at school, then you hear a total different thing. So it's almost like that bicultural upbringing that, you know, which I think is kind of a cool thing. You know, you get the best of both worlds.
And thanks. And you went to school in South Omaha, and you went to UNO. What did you study at UNO?
Yeah, I graduated from South High. Definitely went to all the different schools in South Omaha. I actually started off in Catholic school when I was younger, then later to public schools, and then went to UNO, had a scholarship, the Goodrich Scholarship Program, and I graduated in 1999 with an emphasis. Started off in business, then I went to Spanish, and then with a minor, secondary in music, and then Latino studies, Chicano Latino studies.
And what do you do in the community? I know you have a business, but also you have a cultural organization. Tell me a little bit about your organization in the community.
Sure. Well, like since we were younger, our family's always been involved in the community. So somehow it must have came full circle in my blood to do that. I think when we were at UNO, I think that's, you know, we started getting involved and going out and doing things, you know, in 1990 to 2000, Nebraska was ranked number 10th largest growth of Hispanics, Latinos in the country. So we started to see that growth and excitement and things were happening. And while I was at UNO, you know, we were involved and trying to get more Latinos to come to the university and working on that initiative and just really going out and doing as much as we could. And from there, my goal was to work with the university to continue our outreach and, you know, more for Latinos to empower having more, you know, people coming to the university. But then I ended up starting a company because at that time, because of that growth, we started the Perico, which was it was the first bilingual newspaper. And then we started the Spanish Yellow Pages, Directorio Latino. And so that was 1999. I was graduating and then I started the business at the same time I was a senior. And it really took off. We called ourselves the Nebraska's, what do we say, it was the leaders in Spanish marketing, because we were kind of, I mean, a lot of that we were inventing. It's not like, you know, of course we knew it and we were doing it, but at the same time, these companies had no idea. They had no clue because we were in Midwest, our numbers were low as far as the Hispanic population at that time. So we became that bridge to bridge them onto the South Omaha Latino community. You know, we helped Cox Communications. We helped the Spanish radio stations when they're interviewing the DJ to bring them before they even started the Spanish radio. We were kind of it at that time because there was nothing else out there and they had no way of reaching the Spanish market. And so we were devising those ways of how we could do that. And really the newspaper went from a monthly to a bi-weekly, then it went to a weekly because they said, hey, we need to get information out every week to, you know, the Hispanics in South Omaha. So it really developed because of the interest in there. So it was a kind of an exciting time and our community was growing and things were happening all over and our growth was happening. More leaders were coming about. We saw a couple more professors come to the university. So there's just a lot of things happening. So, and at the same time I was involved in the arts. I've been, you know, doing dance when I was younger, but then I found a love for guitar, which I mainly played in rock bands when I was, you know, right after high school. And then I kind of came back and got into a mariachi group. And then I volunteered about 10 years to help teach young kids in mariachi. So every Monday for 10 years, I was teaching them. And Now we got tons of kids all over playing and got new groups playing. That was called Estritas de Omaha. That was started in 1990 by Dr. Jim Ramirez and Rosemary Flores. So really in 2000, I just kind of took it over to kind of help out and do that. And then from there, we kept it going and we changed our emphasis more. There's not as much teaching the kids the music. And at that time, we went into different schools and we were doing after school programs. We started writing curriculum because there wasn't. So basically in the arts with some of our grants, we had in those after school programs. And then in the last 10 years now, we've just been doing research basically to document the history of what Latinos have contributed, to the Omaha society, basically music, the arts, military, families, sports, and then festivals. That's kind of our emphasis right now. So that's what I kind of did with that. And then in the meantime, I got involved with Cinco de Mayo, and so I'm involved in that organization, and that's become the biggest, event in Omaha. Not just the biggest Latino event; it's probably the biggest Latino event in the Midwest till you get to probably Denver, down to Chicago or Dallas. But it's Omaha's biggest event, so that's grown huge. I'm involved in that, and then just a lot of other initiatives in the community, in South Omaha, always involved in. So it's kind of always something. We started the Barrientos Scholarship Foundation. I could kind of go on and on. I don't know how far you want me to go, but those are just some of the things that I've been involved in.
No, that's wonderful because that leads directly to my next question. What do you see are the main problems that the Latino community has in South Omaha? I mean, we're going to talk in a few minutes more about COVID itself, but before COVID, what did you see were the needs that the community had?
Well, Latinos in South Omaha, Omaha's been growing and development is going on. And, South Omaha, because before that, I think in the 80s, South Omaha was really dying. There was a lot of vacancies. The population was getting older. And then Latinos come in, which have kind of that entrepreneur spirit. They really revived South Omaha. There's no vacancies, and there was a revitalization. John Barrientos spearheaded the redevelopment to kind of get that done. But I think when we look at now, you can see throughout this time that we've been hard workers and our population's growing even more in different segments. And I think the business sector is going to continue to grow. But I think our struggle now is the inequities that we face as a Hispanic society, that we're not really given the same opportunities. I mean, what I see as barriers is, for example, we have a number of Fortune 500 companies, but we have no leadership in those companies. We don't have anybody up. We have all the worker bees down here, and we got a couple of managers, but we don't have the VPs. We don't have the presidents. We don't have the people that can push the button and say, hey, we want to make this happen. Because I think the mainstream society, they're so used, at least in Omaha, because, we have South Omaha's Latinos, North Omaha's Blacks, and then 42nd on out west is whites. It's very segregated. So people are very detached and don't know what's going on. And I think the problem is they're so caught in their bubble or their narrow, funnel here, that they don't see the rest of everything else. They know what they're comfortable with. So I think the problem is that they don't, take the time to look and bridge the other communities on, especially Latinos. So I think we face a lot of inequities, especially in funding. Right now, we're looking at funding. We don't get the equal funding as anyone, whether it's, for example, our Museo Latino, I think there's only a handful in the country, very unique. And you have the other museums, but she doesn't get any equal funding compared to anyone else. Our Latino Center of the Midlands, which I think has been around the longest standing nonprofit I think that we have in South Omaha. But when you look at their overall budget, they don't get the same funding compared to some of these other ones. So we're kind of given the crumbs, we're given the leftovers, and they want us to fight over it. But we're saying, no, you know what? We're hard workers in our community, our kids, our families, our society. We need that equal funding to do the same quality of work. and programs as everyone else, because without that funding, we cannot get to that level. So I see that as a true obstacle. And of course, there's been racism. I mean, we don't hear a lot of talking about racism. We don't see it blatantly out there, but I mean, I know my grandfather and his brothers faced it. My uncles have faced it. My father told me he was at the fire station. He faced it, in the Navy, we faced it, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always have it out there. I faced racism as a young kid, being called a spick, a beaner, a taco, getting chased by, big white bullies or whatever it may be. So, I mean, we had 3 generations of being oppressed and being, discriminated against, but at the same time, we all worked hard. We moved our way up to middle class. Some of us went to the military. We did well, despite the maybe not getting, and nobody wants a handout. We're working hard, but at the same time, I think in programs, we like to see equality. So I think there's definitely we're not all playing on the same field. And I think society's talking about that now, that there was very much inequities throughout society because there's a handful of people that control all that money. Basically, white men control that money, and that money's not being distributed because they only say, oh, I know that I know that one. I don't know anything about that one, so I'm not going to give it to you. Well, get to know us because we're hard workers and we do good things. So that's definitely an obstacle, big obstacle right now.
Thanks, Marcos. Moving on to the main topic of our conversation, can you tell me, when did you first heard about COVID-19?
When I first learned about what?
When did you first learn about COVID?
Gosh, I don't know. I think through a little birdie. I quit listening to the news and to the TV, the media, because I feel the media is negative, especially towards ethnic groups. The only time they say something about it is negative. So I kind of cut myself off from that world because I didn't want to hear the negativity or they won't put anything positive about us in the media either. So it's like, well, we're not in it. What's the sense of listening to it when it's just always bad news? So I started just to hear people start to talk about it a little bit, this and that, COVID, and then I think when you started really see more action done, then it came a little bit more prevalent that it's like, oh, okay, this is real. I better go back onto the media and check. So then I quit it. My goal was I didn't want to look at anything anymore. And so then I had to start looking again to kind of get updates.
And what was your first, once you got these updates, what was your first reaction? Did you already knew this was something that was going to be as big as it is, or you thought it was something that will go away in a couple of weeks?
I think it was the uncertainty and being a little nervous because so then you're researching, okay, what is it? What is going on? Can I catch it? Because the whole media vibe was very kind of scary. Everyone, that's all they were talking about. It's like, oh my gosh, da 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 da, and everyone's talking about that. So you want to know what exactly. So I think there was a scary point. I think for definitely the first month because no one was really sure, maybe a month or two. And just afraid to touch anything, afraid to do this, afraid to do anything. I remember the first time I went to a hotel room, I was scared to touch anything or to do anything because we just didn't know. I was like, oh, can I sleep here? I mean, that was just the whole paranoia. That whole paranoia was just very, it's not good for anybody. So, yeah.
And the first cases, local cases in Omaha came in early March. The school closed shortly after, closed. But then that's very close to the biggest event that you've mentioned, right? Cinco de Mayo in South Omaha, that you coordinate. How did you adapt? What were you thinking when you saw what COVID was producing and that you were coordinating a very large mass gathering?
Yeah, what was thinking about, I'm basically per se like an event coordinator in marketing. That's what I do. I do some real estate on the side, but event management is what I do. So, hey, you're saying you can't do no events. Well, shoot, that just shuts me out. We start working on our event in like July. We're planning by December. We got the whole plan. By January, we started executing. March, the week when they just shut everything down, we were just getting ready to do our first event and it got all shut down. We basically had already had, we had already accumulated a lot of expenses. We already spent a lot of money. So, just like everyone else, we're trying to figure out, oh my God, what are we going to do? Talking to people in Omaha, talking to the other events in Omaha, what's everybody going to do? So it was always, and we're still talking, what's the next step and what's going to happen? I think the uncertainty is because nobody knew. We're all talking to each other and nobody ever had the answers because there was no answer, because we're just waiting for the whole thing to clear up, the COVID thing. But economically, it definitely impacted us. I would say it impacted South Omaha in my organization, other ones worse than others. And why? Because again, back to funding, equal treatment. We weren't given the same treatment, and I can give you an example that I know one other festival that was doing something and it was right at the same time, they had to cancel it. I think they collected 100,000. They only had to get back like 5. That we were about the same ballpark. We collected about 100, but almost everybody wanted their money back or they wanted a credit. It's like, well, hold it. How are we going to survive? I mean, we already accumulated the expenses. We already, we can't. We weren't treated the same as the other event. So why were we treated different than everyone else? And then when we went to look for funding for virtual events, I was talking to all the organizations around town. They said, oh yeah, we're doing that bad. Our funders are supporting us, or, they're taking care of us. They're still continuing to give us funding. Us, zilch. We just got totally cut off. So that was a huge challenge for us to try to do this event. We couldn't do it. And then we're just totally cut off. One is we're already cut off from the world because we can't really go out because of COVID. And then two, our organization of funding was just totally cut off.
And later in the year, were you able to apply to any of the relief funds?
Yeah, we were, going throughout the year, we ended up doing a couple of virtual events, but again, not well received from supporters. And then, yeah, that's really if it wouldn't have been for that, I don't even know. I probably have a different job or a different something to do because, because we work on a year round basis, with interns and with people and contractors and everything else. And luckily we got a couple grants that really saved us. Without those, we would have never survived. So yeah, that was very, very crucial. But then, we got that funding, but later you heard just a few weeks ago that all that funding distributed millions of dollars. Well, most of it went to the big guys again. And, they've already got funding. They got millions, they got foundations, they got, people with millions of dollars that give them money all the time. They took the majority. And then again, all the minority groups just got the leftover peanuts that was left, which, we could have all used a little bit more, but they gave all to the, to the bigger mainstream that always get all the money anyway. But luckily we still got some, it got us by. And we're still struggling now. I mean, we're a year later and we're still not getting, anything close to funding, for an event that we are going to do in person. We're doing a virtual event, but we're still not getting, equal funding.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. And we are 2 weeks away probably from Cinco de Mayo. This year, how did you plan it? Did you plan to always have it virtual, or did you plan to have it in person?
Well, we didn't know. I mean, we were meeting with all the main festivals in Omaha. We've been meeting like once a month or once every other month. And then we've been meeting with the doctor from UNMC that's kind of consulting us, telling us, here's what's going on, everybody. Here's what we think. He gave us his opinion. And, through, again, at the early months, we really didn't know. As time started to get past and it looked a little bit better for the COVID side of it, so it's like, oh, okay, I think maybe we can see through the clouds a little bit. We start getting a little clearer picture. Then we start planning a little bit more. So we moved based off listening to the doctor tell his analysis of where he thought COVID was going, how fast to be with vaccinations, that he thought after June would be okay. April, May, kind of like, we'll be getting there. But at that time, Vaccines were just starting. They weren't sure, but the new president has basically been keeping them out. I think they're right on target. So we decided to move our event back a month to June, kick it off with a virtual event because some companies still can't do anything. Their policy says, we're not doing anything to the end of June. So we did a virtual event to kind of highlight our community. And then in June to do the actual festival. So, but when you think about it, nothing has really per se happened as far as a big event yet. Not really till June. There'll be a festival before us. The first week of June will be the second big festival. And then after that, the College World Series. So in June, that's going to be the real test to see where it goes. I mean, it sounds like they're right on target for vaccines. Most people by then should have hopefully the opportunity. But they said definitely by July, August, September, things would look a lot better, which we have our sister event, which is Fiestas Patrias Omaha in September. By then, God willing, it should be decent.
Tell me a little bit about the event itself. It's in South Omaha. It's in a park. It's in the streets.
Well, it's always been traditionally, we have actually a photo of my grandparents back, I think in the 1930s. The first Mexican festival was documented in 1920 along South 24th Street. It said there were 500 Mexicans, gathering to celebrate 16 de Septiembre, Mexico's Independence Day. So ironically, last year was supposed to be our big celebration for our 100-year anniversary, which is really, it's very unique that, especially for a town that's always been mainly white, to have an ethnic group that's basically celebrating the longest standing, ethnic group to have, festivals going for 100 years, longer than the Italians and the Czechs and everyone else they've been doing it. So I think that's pretty unique. So it's always been traditionally done in historic South 24th Street. The heart of it is 24th and N. And, it might move around a little bit. I think in some early years, they even had it in the basement of the Chicano Winter Center. They had it in the plaza. They had it down by the church. It would move around here and there. But as it got bigger, and then they incorporated the parade, it became more and more. You really seen, again, you see that growth of the festival. You look at the pictures, which are really cool to look at the black and whites in the 70s. And then we look at the 80s, they had the parade go down 24th. Not a lot of as many people, there were people there, but, it was very sparse. But now when you look at it, tons of people, but the 90s is when it really kicked off. It just grew by leaps and bounds. And I think Cinco de Mayo is really not as meaningful to Latinos, to Raza, to Mexicanos, because that's not their Independence Day. It was, why did they pick the 5th of May, for the Battle of Puebla? I don't know, but it really became more commercially successful. And I think the United States is good at that. Why that happens, I don't know. I mean, even St. Patrick's, what is St. Patrick's? I've seen a bunch of Mexicans and Latinos, they're out drinking green beer. Why? St. Patrick's is just another, I think the United States has been good at gimmicks. That's why we have all these different things. And Cinco de Mayo has really just become I think it's become a commercial success, because it's very popular. I played for the mariachi, and we get tons of calls for May 5th. I mean, one year we played in the morning from 8 in the morning till 12 midnight, nonstop, every hour, boom, 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 just playing. Why? Because everybody wants to do something. Everyone's trying to get in on it. Everyone's trying to capitalize it. I had a Greek restaurant wanting a mariachi group, because that's the way, the kind of the American way, right? Let's capitalize off this, and that. So Cinco de Mayo has become a commercial success. So with that, now in 2019, we became the largest local Omaha event, basically having 250,000 visitors from about a six state range. So it's just tremendously grown over the years.
And now that you're gonna have it in June, are you thinking about doing social spacing or asking for if people were vaccinated to attend? How are you including those things into the in-person event in June?
Sure. Well, anybody that's doing an event is still required to give a COVID plan to Douglas County. So we submit our plan, it's been approved. A lot of questions asking, what are you going to do? So we're hoping one is it gets better, but we'll still have a plan in effect in case, things aren't better. So one is everything is going to be spread out. There's going to be, every booth will be 10 feet apart. So you have one booth, normally they're back to back, right together. So we'll have every other booth, 10 feet. We'll also have it enclosed. So we'll have like masks. There won't be mandated, but it'll be recommended, or we'll have the option. Here's a mask if you need one. So they can do that. We'll have signage saying, hey, if you have fever, or COVID, we're not going to take everyone's temperature, but we'll have signage saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't come in. So recommendations, hand sanitizer, we'll have sanitizer stations all over. And, anybody we'll have a kind of like a health area. So then if anybody needs anything, they can go to that if they want to get checked or whatever the medical need will be. So we'll definitely have some protocol in place for that.
And what are your expectations in terms of attendance?
That is a really good question because we have no idea. We talk about it. I mean, one is it could either be, steady and kind of slow, or it could just be everyone. Kind of ever seen those movies where everyone's yelling, everybody's like, I want out. That's like they want to go do something. Everyone's tired of being locked up, and we want to go, do something. And we think it's going to be the latter, that everyone's just going to be out there, and it's kind of maybe be more packed than we thought. I mean, if you look at South Omaha now on a Sunday, it's jam packed. I mean, there's no parking spots. There's cars waiting to go down the street. There's people at the shops. There's people at the food places, and that's just on a normal day. And I've seen the same thing in the old market. There's tons of people like on the weekend when the restaurants open, boom, there's a waiting line. So, I think by then it should be getting better. If it's a beautiful day, there's probably going to be a lot of people out.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned that that this now South Omaha is back. People are, going to restaurants and everything. Was this the same throughout the year, or was there a time when South Omaha really became empty? Or at least South 24th Street?
No, I mean, everyone was hurting. We did, when was it? Like right around, it was right around May, because remember, we didn't have the festival. And of course, the press was interested. So we did some interviews, and we actually did an interview with the TV station at one of the restaurants, Michoacana, and there was nobody in there. I mean, just nobody was really coming out because there was still so much uncertainty. People were scared. So, you didn't see, people might go get their essentials, go to the grocery store, or go get whatever, but everything else, everyone's a little nervous. So, the luxury of going to a restaurant was kind of, I'm not sure if I want to go there yet. There's still people that still haven't gone to a restaurant, but, and unfortunately, that interview, the one person that I knew that passed away from the community was actually the guy that did the interview. From La Michoacana, he ended up getting COVID and passed away. So, but we did that interview just to kind of address, hey, what's going on in South Omaha? Yeah, definitely businesses were struggling. And he said his business was struggling. And look he was working in a public place. I don't know how he got it, but he ended up getting COVID and unfortunately passing away. He had 5 kids.
Yes. And from your perspective, what have been the main effects of COVID in the Latino community in Omaha and in South Omaha?
Well, because you got to remember the income level is lower, right? So we're those essential workers. Not all of us. I mean, there's a handful of sort of professionals, and we can work from home and do whatever. But then, if you look at any restaurant, those are usually the cooks, the cleaning staff, the just all those essential workers at the grocery stores. Not maybe everywhere in town, but at least the ones in South Omaha. So, how does one survive, especially if one's not, doesn't have, all the credentials or whatever they may need, or doesn't have savings, those type of families are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's just hard survival. And then all of a sudden, okay, what am I going to do? Not work or work, am I going to still work at the grocery store? Well, I still got to pay my bills. So I think that was, hard on the community. I know I still do mariachi on the side. I played at funerals, people that passed away from COVID. And we weren't masked with the mariachi. That was the kind of thing that we did. But, people, we heard about the packing houses because everyone still wants their meat. Someone's still got to cut it, get it ready. But at the same time, you put yourself to exposure. I mean, I started to see people and hear people that I knew, they got it. Like I know a number of people at the packing houses, they got it. And then one of them was a mariachi, and then because he plays with other mariachis, then they got it, then it goes on and gets passed on to everyone. So, because everyone still needs to survive, what are you going to do if you don't have that savings or that luxury that you can work from home on your computer? So that was really tough on our community. I mean, we heard a little bit about it out there, but I don't, sometimes people only care about themselves. I mean, that there wasn't that much concern. Yeah, there was some unemployment money that was given, but not everyone can apply for that, or have access to that. Or even I know I helped some people. It wasn't an easy task, to try to get all that paperwork in and get it done. It wasn't something easy that comes overnight. So yeah, definitely a lot of obstacles for Spanish speaking families in South Omaha.
Did you see, or do you know if any of the main stores and restaurants in South 24, where the Cinco de Mayo festival is, did they have to close? Do they, or did everything survived at the end?
Well, there were some usually there's no vacancies in South Omaha. There's no vacancies. And that was one of the first times that you saw vacancies come open, hey, for rent. You never see that, but how is a clothing store going to survive during a pandemic? Nobody's going to go get clothes. I mean, my one friend, she has a salon de belleza, she has a hair shop. I don't even think people were allowed to do haircuts at that time, so she had a hard time. Eventually, once they finally let people come in, they had to wear masks, but then people were still slow at coming in and getting their haircut. I mean, I don't think I went and got my haircut for a few months or at least a couple months. I can't remember how long it was, but so, that's 2 to 4 months of, certain people that their business was just completely shut down. Then you still have rent and everything else. So yeah, that was just a really, really tough time on those businesses, a number of them. And like I said, some of them are gone. Some of them still survived. I don't know how, but some did.
Thanks. Now, thinking about more about your family and your personal life. You mentioned that you have a large family. How did COVID impacted your family life, both with your partner, children, and with your extended family?
Well, I think one is first you start the isolation point. It's like you love your loved ones, but being around each other all the time, it's like, oh my God, that's tough, But I think there were some good things. The tough was always constantly being, stuck in the house. But then the second thing is two pros and cons. Example, Thanksgiving. We did just Thanksgiving with our own immediate family. And that was the first time, because as far as I can remember, since I was a kid, you know, we always got together like with my mom and sisters and all the kids and stuff like that. And then on Christmas, ever since, again, I was a little kid, you know, we would go to my grandparents' house every Sunday. And then on Christmas, we do Christmas in a summer activity. We get all of our cousins. My aunts and uncles are basically like, you know, my mom and dad. My cousins are like my brothers and sisters. Because why? We've grown up and done stuff ever since we were little kids. You know, we've been around each other. You know, this was the first time I was like, wow, this is the first time we never got together, you know. We never got together, you know, for that Thanksgiving celebration, for the Christmas celebration, for the summer celebration. We couldn't do it. And that was the very, very first time. And I thought, wow, that's kind of sad. We've been doing this since like, and now we're not doing it. So I think that was kind of hard. I think especially I think because as they're getting older, aunts and uncles, you don't want them to get sick, but at the same time you miss them. You want to see them, how they're doing. There was limitations on being able to see them. We did have one cousin on my grandfather's brother's side that, you know, he died. He got COVID. Fortunately, at least on our side, nobody passed. You know, some people got sick, some people got it, but no one died. But I think fortunately, I think we had one in the entire family, I think, that passed away. But it was scary. And at the same time, it was just, everything's on hiatus for a whole year. It's like, oh my God, you know, we can't do this, can't do that. We can talk on the phone. The cool thing was that started calling people and talking to people. Like my uncle said, he's in California, but he's making phone calls, catching up on things because he's a comedian and he travels around the world, but you know, the entertainment world was just shut off. So he's not doing anything. So the cool thing was he was spending time calling people, and so was I. I remember I would walk. I was starting to get a little anxious and got like, oh my God. And I would go to Colorado, New Mexico, and I would walk for hours. Some days I'd walk 8-10 hours a day. And sometimes I would just be talking to people. And it felt really good. That was my therapy, because how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this whole aspect? I'm not a person that can sit still or be confined. So my therapy was playing a little bit of music. That's always been my therapy, to kind of write a song or play. And that really released me. Then the other thing was being in the sun and walking. And then I would talk to people. I'd walk for hours and call people, hey, how you doing? And just talk. And that felt really good. So I think we all had to adapt to the good and the bad of what was going on.
Mm-hmm. And have you started doing things with your extended family again, or you're still cautious about that?
We have, because, you know, like I think all my aunts and uncles have gotten vaccinated now. I'm over at my tia's house right now, my aunt's house. So, and, you know, I'm used to seeing them more often. So, you know, we've been taking them food. Sometimes I just, hey, the food's outside your door, pick it up, you know. But now that it's better, now we can go in. And we would still wear our masks, you know. Once we at least knew about the pandemic, that what was safe and not, then at least we knew, okay, we can go in, wear our mask, and at least see them now. Now we're starting to feel that, since, you know, most of us have gotten you know, vaccinated, that, you know, now we can spend a little bit more time. It's still not the way it was yet, because I think there's still a little bit of paranoia, but it's definitely better.
Going back a little bit to the community, what you just told me made me think of something. You mentioned that there's inequalities in the city, and South Omaha is not as well funded as other areas of the city. Was that the case with the vaccines as well? Did you see that there were less vaccines? People had less chances of getting vaccinated compared to the rest of the city?
I don't really know, because I never really researched or really analyzed how many stations are in this area, part of town, that one. So I couldn't adequately answer that. I do know that One World played a huge role from the beginning. One World, you know, health centers that, you know, I remember when they started, you could go get tested but there was a huge line. I mean, there was a line blocks long. You have to wait forever just to get at the beginning. You had to wait a long time. But I think they were always there. And now with the vaccinations, they're just vaccinating around, as much as they can. And now you're starting to see that they're kind of all over. I think at the beginning, there was just maybe only one, maybe two places, but how did it compare to everyone else? I don't know. That would be a good question to find out. I'm sure like everything else, probably not. We probably had one or two, and other places had, 5 or 10, and knowing, the way it is, but I don't personally know, but I do know that there was access, but there were long lines to get it.
Thanks. Now, thinking about that, it's been 14 months, 15 months since all this started, and there's the idea that this will be better in the future, in the near future. What do you think how do you think your life is going to be different after things return to some form of normalcy?
How will it be different?
Or are you just going to go back to the same things you're doing before?
There's some things I actually like. I was a kind of a germophobic anyway, especially during the winter. I was always trying to eliminate how to get the common cold and the flu. And my goal I quit doing the flu shot because I kept feeling like I kept getting sick. So I quit the flu shot, and my, I guess my thought was if I just don't touch any germs, whatever, I won't get sick. And there were a couple winters I didn't, because I would try not to, touch any, door handles or this or that. I would wash my hands. So I didn't really like in the wintertime, mainly in the wintertime, I just didn't like shaking hands or touching too much stuff. So I was already at that point. So when they said, hey, we don't have to, it's like, great. I didn't want to do it anyway, so I don't know, adapting more in the future. One is I hope it stays that way. I'm okay with giving her a little fist bump or not shaking anybody's hand. I'm actually fine with that anyway. Aside from that, I think as a society, we need that human interaction. I mean, I've seen how it's affected people I know. I've seen how anxiety that has come upon people. I know just a couple of weeks ago, I had got 2 calls in the same day of individuals that I know that their kids killed themselves, and no one ever wants to hear that or see that, but we know that, depression has hit, this anxiety of, we're not meant to be, so isolated, I think, as human beings. So I think we need to get back out there as a society, as a person, to interact, with everybody, to I think it feels better. I think the sun feels good. That's why I kept doing it. I told you need to get outside, walk a little bit. You need to get some of that vitamin E. It's good for our being, for who we are. So I hope it gets back better, and that we can start becoming an interactional society. To be honest, I don't like Zoom calls. I don't like, I'd rather have or when we're in a meeting, I sometimes like it when we're in person compared to doing it on the Zoom. Are there some advantages? Yeah. I think there are. So you don't have to drive there. You can do a couple of things at the same time while you're on the, we're all multitaskers. So I think there's going to be pros and cons. I think they say, will it ever go back to normal? Probably not, because there are some good things. I know, like the city, we always have to file this permit. And, we have to go there, we got to give them the app, we have to go up there, then we have to go downstairs, got to get to the cashier, then we have to go back upstairs, give it, and then we got to mail it down to the state, then we got to wait for the state, then we got to pay them. That's like a 5-step thing. Man, I did it. I swear I must have only spent maybe an hour, and I got it all done. Now they're all doing it. It's like, you guys need to continue this. This is way more easier to do this over the phone, to send you by email, you approve it, we pay with the card, boom. I think there's stuff that definitely they could implement that I think cuts time, saves time and money and processing. Keep it. We don't need to go do that in person. Those kind of things, yeah, let's keep doing that.
Wonderful. You have children in school age,
right?
Right. How did you see this impacted them?
Well, I think for any youth, including my own, the lack of opportunity, they've started to become a little bit antisocial, where they just don't want to go do anything. And they didn't want to go back to school, and we're like, nah, you're gonna go back to school. You need to interact. You need to do your bodily functions and move. You just can't keep sitting on the computer, with this. It's not healthy. I don't believe just, a human being is actually, from what I read, we're not meant to sit in a chair for that long. We're supposed to be moving and doing this and that and whatever it may be. But I don't think it was healthy for them. So I think it was definitely adjustment, and we continue to push them to be better, to have a balance, to do that. But I think it's always a challenge, and I'm sure for every different kid it's a different level. So taking each individual and each child, youth, to kind of work at where they're at. So I think there were some definitely challenging points, but I think the good thing is I think we survived. We got through it, and we did some trips too. Just went to the mountains and did some hiking. And the good thing is I got them to exercise more. It's like, no, you're going to exercise. You're going to do this and do that, and everybody's exercising. So that's the cool thing. We start playing games. Okay, we're going to do this. We're playing for push-ups, whatever it may be. So yeah, and they're all actually doing good in school. They're all getting A's and B's. So, but I want to see them now out. And the only thing that I think the disadvantage is they're not involved. They weren't able to be in a club or in a sport, or like my one boy's in football. He wasn't in football again. I think they need that. I think, and then if you're going to try to get scholarships, you need that extra outreach, to be doing stuff. So I think next year, unfortunately they're younger. I feel bad for anybody that was a senior in high school, a senior in college. It's like that last year, man, it had to be detrimental. One is you're going out to get a job, or two is you're getting ready to, that had to be terrible. For them, I feel my heart goes out to them. So fortunate we weren't at that stage. So I'm hoping hurry up and get back to normal. So my kids and any other ones will have a better future, to be out there.
Thank you. That's really interesting. So those are my questions. Are there any questions that I didn't ask you that you thought I would have asked? Or is there any theme that we didn't touch that you think will be important for us to talk?
And you're talking in reference to the pandemic, as far as anything that's kind of, yeah. I think, we're still in the pandemic. Let's see, what are we in? We're in April 2021. It's been a little bit over a year now. Are things back to normal? No, they're definitely not back to normal. I don't know if they'll ever go back to normal society the way we knew it. I think if we can take the good, the good parts of what came out of it, that'd be great. The other parts, hopefully they'll go back to normal. So I'm hoping just for the best for everyone, that everyone can have healthy minds and healthy bodies and do well, especially for kids and youth. I think a lot of people have died, and hopefully we can come out appreciating, our loved ones and friends and family and society a little bit more. I think we see our indifferences in this world, and I think, society and people can be a beautiful thing. I know there's some ugliness in the world, but I always like to look at the more positive side, that, this person, that person, they're all unique. They're a little bit different. Well, that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes cultural and different societies unique and beautiful, by our differences. So I'm hoping that we can get back out into the world and explore that and talk to people and get out there and do that after this is all said and done, and that we're not locked up in a little bubble, and that we'll come out of our bubbles and learn to, live life again.
That is a great way to end our conversation. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for this interview.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.